Item number 13 is an application for a binding report in the Borough of Brooklyn, docket number 15-7151, Pearl Street and adjacent streets in the Dumbo Historic District, a street grid laid out circa 1830. This is an application to amend a previous approval to install paving.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Harley Bond, the Preservation Staff. This is an application for an amendment to an existing approval for a street and sidewalk reconstruction project in the Dumbo and Vinegar Hill Historic Districts, which was last read by the Commission in September 2013. The yellow on this map shows the project scope. The existing approval included creating a raised pedestrian plaza at the Pearl Street Triangle, which is located here to continue along the Manhattan Bridge approach. The previous proposal approved the installation of a granite cobblestone in the plaza area. The applicants have returned today and are proposing to revise the paving within the plaza to a granite paver that is 24 by 36 inches in size to better meet barrier-free access requirements. And Jeremy Woodoff from the Department of Design and Construction is here to discuss the change.
Okay, do we have a motion to open the hearing, please? Second, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Woodoff, Department of Design and Construction, Historic Preservation Office. This is a fairly large underground utility and street reconstruction project that extends from Dumbo Historic District into Vinegar Hill. And what you saw last fall was showed you that most of the streets in the districts are cobblestone, including some rather old stone that's of a less regular nature that is seen in many parts of the city. There's even some historic granite crosswalks that remain in the district. Much of the discussion focused on this pedestrian plaza, which is at the location here near the Manhattan Bridge, where Anchorage Place and Pearl Street come together. This interim plaza is maintained by the local business improvement district and would be expanded as part of this project to include Anchorage Place all the way up to Plymouth. It would be expanded and made permanent. We had created a mock-up which you saw showing the intent for the reconstruction of the streets throughout the project, reusing the historic cobblestones and installing new granite bike path. Also, the typical pedestrian crosswalks would consist of these large granite pavers. At the plaza itself, there is a plan aside for the paving to install a rather large bench structure here and some combination seating areas and planters. This is an overall view of the proposal you saw. And here you can begin to see the paving, which is in question today. It was intended to be a cobblestone type paver, similar in size, but they would be new stones because the plaza really has to be accessible under ADA guidelines, and most of the existing cobblestones in the district are of the type that really would not meet that the criterion for accessibility. Here you can see the proposed pattern that we showed you, which was essentially using the existing railroad track as a guide for the orientation of the new paving stones. In its review of the project, the Commission asked us to continue working with the staff on the paving sizes and colors at the bike lanes, crosswalks, and plaza. And that's in fact what we've done and are now showing you the revision that we are proposing for the plaza area. The first thing we did was to look at the history of the site immediately adjacent to the Manhattan Bridge. And you can see here the outlines in red of the historic streets and building lines, which of course were obliterated when the bridge was built. But we have taken those outlines and used them as a way to orient the paving stones so that there would be what we hope is a subtle but meaningful reflection of that part of the history of the district. We've also changed the size of the pavers that we're proposing instead of cobblestone size to the 24 by 36-inch size that is the same as is being proposed at the crosswalks throughout the district. The stone would be a dark gray, fine-grained granite, such as shown here, with a thermal finish. Here, again, you can see that paving detail showing the size of the pavers, and in two areas in between the rails of the tracks, we would be able to install salvaged cobblestones from the district. And the last two slides give you some sense of the scale that would be that would result from this installation, and also the change in patterning here. You can see it from the side to the other.
Okay, questions? Yes, Michael, around the table.
This might be more for Sarah, but when we looked at meatpacking, they have the same exact condition where they have a triangular plaza. And my recollection is that they're using cobblestones for their plaza, and I know that they talked specifically about the handicap accessibility of it, and that they were achieving that, if I'm not mistaken, either with a new cobblestone or with, I don't think they were going to a panelized product, were they?
We have in other instances approved a smooth-surfaced Belgian block that is cobble size, but it doesn't have the irregular surface. And so we've done that in instances to allow for a barrier-free
So given
walkway. Can you, maybe Carly, talk about
So the
Gatsby?
and Jeremy might be able to shed some light on this, but the meatpacking project was proposing to take some of their cobbles and reuse them and group them in such a way that they could achieve barrier-free access in certain locations and in other locations not have the access.
Right, so my recollection is that, I'm sorry,
The cobblestones in the meatpacking district are much later, actually, than the ones here in Dumbo. They are much more, they are regular in size, they're dimension stone essentially. And by picking the smoothest examples of those, the consultants in that case feel that they would be able to create the areas that need to be accessible from those stones. In this district, if we were to do that, the stones would have to be moved to begin with, because the existing stones are much too irregular and roughly textured.
we had here a few weeks ago an application from the Seaport District where granite pavers of this size were cracking after 20 years, was it, that they were installed?
No, that was the,
Brooklyn
Hall.
Oh, okay, Borough Hall. So are these going to be thick enough to take
These
cars
are
and trucks?
5 inches thick, which I believe is thicker even than the ones we've been using as other crosswalks, which have held up.
Yes, Roberta?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand the reason to go to this is because that you, I mean, what is the reason to go to this rather than you, so you're saying that they're not, the ADA compliance things
No,
don't
there are a couple-
conform, I mean, those,
There
the
are a
smaller
couple of
ones don't
reasons.
conform?
We thought we could not use historic cobblestones in the plaza because of accessibility reasons, at least in most of the plaza. We thought just as because this is now a formal permanent pedestrian plaza, using a paver that was somewhat different from the typical vehicular street pavement was appropriate. And also, it actually matches exactly the paver that's used at pedestrian crosswalks throughout this district and in other locations. So it has some affinity for that kind of use anyway. We also felt that in general there was a dissatisfaction with the effect of the smaller, smooth surface, very regular cobblestones that have been used in a couple of places. Bowling Green is one. Some of the bike lane in another part of the Dumbo district that's been done is another, where it just didn't seem, it neither appeared historic nor just particularly aesthetically pleasing. So we decided for those reasons, both positive and negative, to go with the larger stones.
But this one doesn't actually, it doesn't really give you any memory of what that area is known for,
Except
right?
for
This
the
is like
area
something
within the
else.
tracks,
This is,
Yes.
One more question. was saying that you were using all, and kind of agglomerating the existing cobbles and relocating them to various places, including here. Will the fact that you're now not using these allow you to put cobbles elsewhere in the district that would expand the amount of good cobblestone streets that you have?
I think it will undoubtedly, although we're not entirely sure what's under the asphalt paving at this plaza. We assume there are some store cobblestones, and I'm sure they will be used elsewhere in the district where we're short of stones.
Libby, do you have a question? Or-
No, I think it's been answered in the past.
Okay, any other questions?
Just, okay.
Yes.
Question about the renderings that are here. So this is like not what it is, or this is in another area and you'll keep that, but you won't? So these areas that you're showing right now, yeah?
Well, no, this is the
Oh,
proposed.
no, not that one. I'm saying the
Oh.
ones that have the seemingly cobblestone. on- and-
Scale,
Yeah,
that one.
so those,
These,
or go back, yeah,
well, these stones,
yeah.
and a typical crosswalk configuration, streets of this sort, this is a Plymouth Adams, they will remain as they are. They'll be
Okay,
picked
so
up and
your
back.
Anchorage Place from Pearl Street, so those renderings still remain?
The,
Those scenes still remain?
this rendering,
No, that, yes, those.
these, well, in general, they remain, but the paving will be different, there'll be larger pavers.
So it won't be this, it'll be the big one.
This is what you saw last
It's the
fall.
previous
I
presentation.
don't have the same rendering, I have these two, these are very similar.
You had one with the original ones.
See, they're
in
the
tracks.
large things, that's what's gonna happen.
That we don't, well, here, actually, that's shown here.
Oh, there it is, okay.
The color will be that different to the old one?
That's, I don't know.
There will be
That's
some
that's what they
difference in that
proposed
the
previously.
historic stones have more
So
of a
that was
variety, there are some lighter examples as well as some darker ones. They won't be, it won't be
No
as uniform
testimony,
as you
right?
see.
No testimony.
And in fact, this probably
Let's
won't be as
find out
uniform
what
either.
is it testimony or not?
There will be some.
Can we take testimony? Maybe. No, I don't know, because Doreen Gallo is gonna yell. Huh? Okay, we had a hearing already? Okay, go ahead, Marjorie.
I mean, in terms of, I understand that a lot of this is motivated by ADA requirements, but in just trying to understand what the parameters of that is. I mean, when you handle bike paths, it's clear that you're creating a path. And if we just talk about simple ADA requirements where you've got to have an accessible route, I'm just wondering why you would need to cover everything with the same material and why there can't just be sort of some kind of broader version on an accessible route.
David and Sophia, if you want to add anything, feel free to. I just would say that if you look at the number of intersections here, you've got these, you have the tunnel under the bridge and the streets here, plus the planters, the benches, and the tables. There's actually, if you sort of overlay all those, there's not a lot left over.
All the pedestrian crossings.
Right, all the pedestrian crossings have to be accommodated.
Mm-hmm.
And although there, I suppose in theory, there may be a few small areas within this that would not technically be within the crossing or accessible requirements, that would create another very strange condition where you have little patches of a different stones.
That's why we have it in the rails, bringing that.
Right, and one of the main reasons was put in the rails is that this really these reflect areas which actually don't require those crossings, although you see it's interrupted here because there's a need to cross this way.
So just further to that,
Get up with your name on the record, please, and speak to it.
I'm David Breen from DOT. So just further to that, when we're establishing these new spaces within the public right of realm, rather, we want them to be fully accessible. You know, it's not. We want these to be spaces that all people can enjoy, residents and visitors alike, of all abilities. So when we're designing these spaces, we don't necessarily look for sort of ADA routes through the space. it's making sure that the whole space is fully accessible.
Okay, anything else? Thank you, we'll go into discussion. This is an amendment to a binding previous approval to install paving in pedestrian plaza. It's a binding report, it's an amendment. Public meeting, not a public hearing. Fred, please.
Well, my view is that, cities evolve and change over time. This, at one time, was a street. Now it's going to be a public plaza for pedestrians. It used to be that no one cared about people with handicap problems. Now we do. And I think we have to, and our cities and our public realms and our buildings have to accommodate these kinds of changes. And I think great cities always figure out ways of doing that that can look to the future as well as honor the past. And I think that's what this this proposal is doing, even second time around. Maybe there are other ways of doing it, but, and with other relatively similar types of materials, maybe, they're a little large. But I think most important is not to repeat some of the failures of paving, granite pavers and others, bluestone particularly in the public realm, and to have to come back again in a few years and as we've seen at Brooklyn Borough Hall, and a few other places, Soho street crossings, and replace it all again. So I'm willing to think that this is good enough, and it certainly recalls, in a general way, paving that was once here at the bottom of this great bridge.
Libby?
I can accept it based on the reason put forth, but I think it's a very sad elimination of a reminder of something that was so defines the Dumbo district. So I regret it.
Michael?
The character of the district and the use of the cobblestones, the Belgian block, was based on the use of this as an industrial district, and as much as some of us may not like the fact that it has changed drastically, it has. And it is now essentially a pedestrian district. It's on the way to becoming a shopping mall. And in fact, it's a responsibility, I think, of the municipal government to make sure that it is, in fact, accessible to all. And in that case, I don't think we have any choice but to approve this. I think they've thought this out well. They're using a stone that will, in color at least, replicate what was there originally, and it'll be a much safer use.
Joan?
Yeah, I agree with all the comments that have been said, and we, as a society, have an obligation to make our new spaces ADA compliant so that it's equal access for everybody. And I applaud the way this team has designed it, because they recall all the history and they treat it with respect, but yet they make it accessible to everybody. So I can support it, and I applaud the application.
I don't think that that it's fair to juxtapose ADA accessibility with historic preservation, because I think that they're not mutually exclusive, and I think that careful and crafted design can accommodate both. So for that reason, although I think that the general change could be appropriate, I think this particular solution kind of doesn't try to take up the second part, which is the historic preservation part. I think it takes up the ADA part perfectly well. But as the applicant said, there are other material solutions that would, whether it's cobblestones or different size granite pieces or different color granite pieces, that would allow for both the production of a smooth, handicapped accessible surface and the recall within that surface of the historic layers that this site embodies, whether those are the buildings that used to be here, the former road layouts, the most recent previous layouts of streets and curbs. And I think as we've seen in other applications of this type, that kind of design with history in mind can produce a richer result that isn't just a kind of paving in a literal way of a pattern, a single pattern over a very large undifferentiated swath of territory. I think it's a missed opportunity.
I have to agree with that in part because there's this one kind of alluring image that's at the beginning of the presentation where it shows sort of the patchwork of, they call it a variety of patterns creating street quilts. And the street quilts are kind of what gives the district a recall of historical layering. And it seems to me that in addition to being accessible, so easily rolled on or walked on with a cane or other kind of difficulties in mobility difficulties, there are other places where kind of patchwork would work and not at all interfere. For instance, I'm looking at the planters where the benches hang off of the planters. You don't stand there. There's opportunity to maybe do cobblestone trim. There's opportunities to keep the cobblestone at play there as a reminder. And I don't think that it would be in conflict with the ultimate accessibility of the plaza. So I just think the solution is kind of a too easy solution.
Diana?
I actually agree with Michael and Marjorie. I think that it's a nice design, but it doesn't really speak much to the historic quality of the district and the area, and that it would be a shame if it were really just incompatible to be able to accommodate people with disabilities without, preserving a little more reference to the historic fabric and district.
And I agree with that too. I think that when we consider things like how to accommodate ADA compliance for a building, we're looking at ramp versus lift versus whatever. We want to give them ADA compliance, but we also want to make sure that whatever the solution is doesn't disrespect what the district is all about. And I think that this solution just sort of forgets the importance of the districts or the physical characteristics that make this district important. And either there are ways to make those, because they're not like stones anymore, they're like slabs. And I think that there's some way to maybe even make them smaller or to vary the patterns or to incorporate areas where you still have cobblestones that maybe haven't been explored. And so I think that this is not the solution.
Okay, so there's not possible to take any action on this, so think about some of the alternatives that have been proposed. I think it's a tough question always, and I think the balance here has been struck, but obviously not 6 people believe that, so we'll just rethink it and see where we go from here and close the hearing now. Motion, second, without objection. Thank you.